إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا أما بعد إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We are, as we all know, dear brothers and sisters, in the month of Sha'ban, which means that the month of Ramadan is right around the corner. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to witness this month of Ramadan and take full advantage of it. And as I was thinking about the topic for today, in terms of how we can prepare ourselves for Ramadan, what I wanted to talk about was using this Ramadan to plant the seeds for the rest of the year. And that only comes when we can establish consistency in our routine by doing small deeds, but doing them consistently. And each of us, every single day, inshallah, we're trying to strive to be better Muslims. And sometimes it's easy to get caught up in this struggle because we have role models to look up to. In terms of the big names of Islam, the big companions of the religion, such as Abu Bakr, such as Umar, radiallahu anhum, such as Ali, the cream of the crop, right? The best of the best. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has elevated their status. We know this. He says about them, radiallahu anhum wa radu an, that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. So looking up to these types of individuals, it can feel as if you are standing at the bottom of a mountain looking up. It seems like such a lofty goal to achieve what these people achieved. It almost seems, dare I say, impossible. It seems intimidating. Because here we are, maybe struggling to pray our 5 daily prayers, and we think about these people and how did they, accomplish the state that they accomplished. One of the aspects that made these companions, the Sahaba Ajma'een, so great in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what got them to the station where Allah is pleased with them, is that the small deeds that they did regularly. And this is the key aspect that I want to focus on today. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a bit of a gap or lack in our knowledge about the companions. Because we hear of all of the monumentous occasions or the huge good deeds that they did. Right? When preparing for the battle, Rasulullah ﷺ asks the companions, who's going to make a donation? We've all heard this story where Umar says that he'll give half of everything he has. And Abu Bakr says he'll give everything that he has. And many of us hearing that story are like, I can't imagine doing that. I can't imagine putting my family in a situation where I give up 100% of my assets and empty out and liquidate my bank accounts. And that seems too lofty of a goal. But not many of us maybe have heard the story of Abu Bakr visiting a blind lady. And this is a habit that he continued even after he became the Khalifa, the leader of all of the Muslims. And Umar one day, he would notice that Abu Bakr would kind of leave town for a little bit. And he didn't know where Abu Bakr was going. And he just kind of left. He didn't give anyone a heads up. So Umar one day was like, I'm curious. So he follows Abu Bakr. And he realizes he's going into this person's house. So after Abu Bakr leaves, Omar enters the house and he sees a blind lady in that house. And he starts talking to her. He's like, who is this man that just came to your house? And the blind lady goes, to tell you the truth, I have no idea who it is. But I do know that when he leaves, he cleans the house. He looks after my home. Sometimes he even cooks for me. And then he leaves without saying a word. And who was that man? Amir al-Mu'mineen Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Right? So we hear them participating in battles, we hear them giving it all, giving everything they have, we hear them trusting blindly in Rasulullah. But maybe we don't hear these stories that on a day-to-day basis, they were doing these consistent deeds, these small deeds. But Abu Bakr was there every day helping out this blind lady. To the point where she doesn't even know who it is. But he's consistently doing it, not looking for recognition, but just to get himself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, we as Muslims need to remember that we all have somewhere to start as well, no matter how small that might be. We all can't just stand here and wonder, how these people got to where they got without even taking that first step. They say if you continue staring from the bottom of the hill, you're never going to make it to the top. So you have to continue to strive, continue to take that first step, continue no matter how small it is, right? And we have to come up with a plan for ourselves that yes, I'm going to take this first step. And sometimes, the shaitan whispers to us that, you're such a bad guy, you never go to the masjid, what's the point of going now? Right? You're so this and this, you don't pray, what's the point of starting to pray now? Like, it's already too late for you. What's the point if you miss another prayer? Right? So the first point here to mention is, don't worry about removing those bad habits before you start a good one. Don't make excuses for yourself that I'm such a bad Muslim, why should I do something good now, even if I have the opportunity? We all have maybe our baggage or our bad deeds that are holding us back from doing something, but don't let those stop you from doing good. This is nothing but a whisper from the shaitan. Just what does Nike say? Just do it. If you have an opportunity to do good, if you're inclined to pray that day, just get up and do it. Don't tell yourself that, oh man, this and that, or what's the point now, or this. Just get up and start somewhere. Don't think about, look, I have to make this whole huge plan for a year, and then I'm going to start praying like this and that. No, just get up and start praying. If I was to tell you there's a hurricane warning, right, and you can't leave town, what are you going to do? You're not going to sit there and make a plan of when you're going to be painting your house and when you're going to be renovating this room and that room. No, you're going to get up and start boarding the walls. Even though there might be other stuff wrong with the house, right? You're not going to sit there fixing a leaky faucet when you know there's a hurricane coming. Just like that, in our lives, personally, and maybe in our spirituality, we have some gaps. We make mistakes, but that shouldn't stop us from doing the good. Secondly, what I've been talking about so far, doing good, small, but consistent deeds. That's the important thing. These deeds are what help us draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah doesn't need these deeds from us. We need them. Allah doesn't gain anything from my prayer or your prayer or my fasting or your fasting. But in reality, we are gaining so much more from that. When we see that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fixed, then everything else in life is going to follow suit. Everything else in life will fix itself. Aisha radiallahu anha narrated that the most beloved of deeds to Allah, from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says the most beloved deeds of Allah are those that are done with regularity, even if they are few. Now, let's put this narration in context. The person narrating this hadith is Hazrat Aisha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, who obviously knew the Prophet like no one else. And she was a scholar in her own right. She taught the companions. And this is her asking the Prophet ﷺ, what can I do to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And think about the million different answers that the Prophet ﷺ could have given. Pray all night, fast all day, do this and that. No. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says something very practical that even all of us can do. A good deed, but do it regularly and consistently. And why is this so beneficial? Right? Again, to relate it back to an analogy that we maybe all can understand. The example of study habits. You know, if I was to tell you that the best way to study is not to cram the night before an exam, right? Or to not finish a work project the day before it's due, that would all make 100% sense to all of us. We would all agree that it's better to study for half an hour a day for 2 weeks rather than studying 4 hours, 5 hours, and pulling an all-nighter the day before your exam or the day before a project is due. So just like that, we have to have this model of regularity in our own spirituality, in our deeds that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, praying or reciting Quran 10 minutes a day is much better in the eyes of Allah than sitting there 4 hours reciting Quran one day and not touching the Quran again for months. So establish that sense of regularity and doing consistent but regular deeds in our own lives. And unfortunately, the culture that we live in, we tend to quantify everything. Right? We count the number of followers we have on social media. We count the approval ratings of politicians and so on. Everything, we want to put a number to it. And we need to stop looking at our spirituality in the same way. We need to stop looking at the sum of the results of our spirituality and rather evaluate the consistency with which we are doing all of these actions. So a small deed, again, done regularly is better than one deed just in one day or for a few hours at a time. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So as we know, and as I mentioned earlier, Ramadan is almost here. And this Ramadan, when we're making goals for ourselves, as we're preparing for this month of Ramadan, I encourage you not to make a goal that you can achieve. Don't sit there and say, look, I'm going to pray all night, and I'm going to recite Quran all day, and I'm going to finish the complete recitation of the Quran 5 times in the month. No. Make goals for yourself that are small, but things that you know after Ramadan, you can continue to do them consistently. And there's so many examples that we can give, you know, whether it's something as simple as glorifying or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout your day, whether it's after your prayer, right? Just saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. I'm going to do that after every single prayer. How long does that take? Maybe 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. But again, the idea is consistency, to develop that level of regularity in our worship. And that is going to in turn get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll close with this story of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which some of us may have heard, but it shows the power of this something so trivial as making dhikr, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one day, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was traveling to Al-Sham, and as he was passing by, it was nighttime, so he needed a place to stay. So he said, look, there's a masjid here, I'm going to just crash here for the night. And he comes into the masjid, he sets up his stuff, but unfortunately the guard that's there, he's saying, look, the masjid is closing, we can't have anybody inside, so you're going to have to exit. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he says, okay, I'll go to the courtyard. And he goes to the courtyard. He starts, sitting there and sets up his stuff for the night, and he's relaxing. But again, this pesky guard comes and he says, look, brother, we can't have you here. The masjid is closing. So now, Imam Ahmad is he can't do anything. He's got nowhere to go. So he goes right outside the gate of the masjid, and he sits there, and this guard is just not having it. He comes out and he's like, man, I'm paraphrasing here, but you really don't understand. We can't have you anywhere on the property of this masjid. So the guard literally, at this point, is dragging him out of the masjid property. So now Imam Ahmad is basically on the side of the street, nowhere to go. And across the street, he notices the light on in a bakery shop, like a baking shop. And it's the middle of the night, but he goes there and he notices the light is open. So he knocks, and the owner welcomes him in, and he tells him the whole story, like, hey, I have no place to go. So the baker invites him in. And the baker says, Ahlan wa sahlan, come on in. And it's the middle of the night, and Imam Ahmad notices that this man is preparing his dough for the next day. Right? He's a baker, so he's making his batch of bread for the next day. And as he's kneading the dough, Imam Ahmad notices that his lips are moving, and he's whispering to himself. So Imam Ahmad is now, he's curious, right? He's like, I'm here, I'm sitting next to this guy in his shop, I might as well ask him what he's doing. So the baker, and he asks him, so I noticed you're saying something, what are you doing? So the baker says that I am making dhikr to Allah. I'm saying Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, as I am kneading the bread. So Imam Ahmad is like, wow, that's very intriguing. Right? So he's like, let me see if I can get more information from this guy. So he says, this is a great habit of yours. Have you noticed any kind of impact as a result of this in your life? Like, what blessings has that brought to your life? And the baker says, subhanAllah, like every dua that I've made has come true. Anything and everything that I've asked for from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has come true. But he says, there's one dua that hasn't been answered yet. And so Imam Ahmad is like, again, he's a curious guy. He's like, okay, so if you don't mind, what is this dua? And the baker says, I've made dua to meet Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, but I still haven't had the opportunity. So at this point, Imam Ahmad is just drowning in tears. He says, because of your dua, I was literally dragged to the streets so I could be to your shop. And the point of this story is that the dhikr that we're making on our tongues might seem so trivial, might seem so little, but the impact that it can have on the blessings in our lives, there's no amount of number we can put to that. So start some sort of practice, right? Whether that is just making the dhikr after prayer, whether it's every time I drive and I have some free time and I'm by myself, I'm going to do dhikr, or I'm going to make dua, whatever it might be. Maybe I need to reconnect my ties with my family. So every week in Ramadan, I'm going to pick one day and make a phone call to somebody in my family I haven't talked to in months. Again, seems trivial, yes, but the impact of those small deeds, again, could be immeasurable on the scales of the Day of Judgment. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this Ramadan the best Ramadan we've ever had, and to allow our hearts to establish this level of consistency in our daily lives. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.